Considering that this conversation revolves around the being and the being in a place, oftentimes it should not be surprising that because everybody is and everybody dies at some point, there is always a measure of spirit around us in some way or another. Now, people will have more or less freedom to see those or to perceive those, to interact with them. But if we feel more or less connected to those spirits that exist around our existence, we can also make our lives based on whether or not we have the spirit with us. And Michel de Certeau, a French philosopher who studied what he called everyday life, made such an inquiry about the places and the spirits of places, especially. And he points out this is from an interview. Memories tie us to that place. It's personal, not interesting to anyone else, but after all, that's what gives a neighborhood its character. So the memories are what tied this particular woman to that place, and as much as it is palpable, as much as it is part of her everyday life, there is something that she can attach onto, and it's probably very difficult to put it in other words than in to the words of a spirit, for example. And Certeau further points out there is no place that is not haunted by many different spirits hidden there in silence. Spirits one can invoke or not. Haunted places are the only ones people can live in, and this inverts the schema of the panopticon. Panopticon is something that another French philosopher, Michel Foucault, um, coined in the context of modern life, which is usually very regimented by a bunch of corporations and governments, and in which everyone is watched at all times by all kinds of surveillance device apparatus. So the haunted place is reverting this schema because of course we in that context are living around these things that are watching us, but kind of watching over us, not so much trying to control us, and perhaps even we could control them. But like the Gothic sculptures of kings and queens that once adorned Notre Dame and have been buried for 2 centuries in the basement of a building in the Rue Chaussée-d'Antin, the spirits themselves, broken into pieces in like manner, do not speak any more than they see. This is a sort of knowledge that remains silent. Only hints of what is known but unrevealed are passed on just between you and me. So again, this connection and this passing on between you and me to something that is more or less palpable, perhaps a broader magical connection, if you will, but more specifically a connection that we can feel emotionally, sensibly to an extent. And so, if there is such a thing as haunting, and if there is such a thing as spirit, and that those spirits are everywhere, and haunted places are everywhere, ghosts slash spirits are one of those things that just tend to exist in that invisible space that we are part of. And, we can see mountains, we can see buildings and walls, but the general space that we actually inhabit has limits that exist past those walls, past those mountains, that are the places that we call our own. And we might call them our own because they're part of our family history, because they're part of a place where we go to work, where we play sports, or maybe the places where we go to church. Those places become our own because of our interaction with them, and they kind of gain their own history, their own life that is more or less independent from ours. What we don't know, what we don't see about that life when we're not there, becomes part of the spirit itself. And in that context, it could be the place of others. It could be a place that we share with government, that we could share with religion, clergy. It's a place we could share with the public or with other families, but they are the only ones that we can really talk about, because those places that we have no connection to, those places that we never have visited and never will visit it, well, those places might as well not exist, might as well be irrelevant to us. So spirits typically have this connection with place, as Levi-Strauss mentioned, but to the larger extent that we exist in the place, we can also figure our own existence around or with or sometimes against the spirits that exist there. And in the way that they are pictured these days in media, the ghosts are appearing in all kinds of fashions for all kinds of reasons, but specifically attached to specific places where, well, something happened, something meaningful happened, something where the ghost itself makes that place worth visiting, makes that place worth seeing. And up until that point, the place was meaningless. But once it is haunted, once it is taken over by the spirit, that place becomes a completely different place. Maybe a place we should avoid, maybe a place we can revisit in the future, but at least it becomes a notable place. So spirits and ghosts in that context are completely unlike Bigfoot, where Bigfoot is part of this wild unknown and kind of popping up whenever he wants, but the ghost and the spirits will pop up kind of whenever we don't want, when we are opposite to the place, opposite to the environment that we are in. And in that regard, it is very easy to see the ghost as the kind of the space of speculation for us, the things that may or may not be there, the things that may or may not appear. And you could say that there is somewhat of a kind of a known that we are throwing ourselves into when we go to new places, and those unknowns could be good or bad, but they are definitely going to change us as people. So, if we find ourselves going into the unknown in competition with spirits, with ghosts, we can also find ourselves trying to intellectually make sense of our place in those places, and of course, trying to make sense of the place of the unknown into our lives, and how much we are willing to deal with the fact that there are unknown elements in our lives. And it is obviously something that is very important for us to figure out, considering the vastness of the world around us. Because, again, out of all the places that we have not visited, there are many of them that we never have to think about ever again. There are also some places that are going to be part of our future that might have been part of our past, or things that are to a wide extent part of our presence. Once we think about those ideas in the broader sense of our existence, our capacity, our purpose on Earth, if you will, now we have to understand the role that those ghosts are going to play in our lives, and or the role that they are playing in the current moment here. And you could summarize that to a matter of our instinct or our intuition. There are the things that help us make sense of those things we don't know in a way that we can't necessarily pinpoint, but a way that will let us know exactly how to feel in the moment. So it could have been something that we have, again, a spider sense about. It could be something that we have feminine intuition about, a third eye vision, a lizard brain, whatever it is. We have all of these devices today that we explain these things on, and these things could be matter of a spirit or an extension of our spirit. But it remains in the end a connection that we are making through that spirit, through whatever that spiritual moment is. When we talked about the spiritualism last week, the idea was certainly that there was a lot of unknown in the world, and that science itself could be used to explain a lot of that unknown. And as the progress of science continued, and the number of unknown kept on expanding, it became kind of another competition of how to explain these things. And it came in terms of the magnetic fluid. It came in terms of the electricity. It came in terms of, other kinds of weird mechanical devices. But in the end, all of those mechanical devices are, again, these points of invisible connection that we make with the unknown, with the things that we do not have. So, in as much as we can materialize them into a ghost, or a ghost that is like this one here, attached to a solid metal ball, a thing that is kind of holding the ghost back, we are also being attracted to the ghost, attracted to what that ghost can do for us. And there is this existential competition between the known and the unknown, this existential competition between life and death, and this much larger competition between the things we know and the things we don't know, the known and the unknown. And by and large, this is a very broad concept, of course, that I have put under the label of a spirit, but it is a way that has been used in a variety of cultures for those connections towards the others and towards the unknown. In this example here, that is taken from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is the pioneer in the processing of um, stages of grief. She points out the particular illness attributable to persecution by the ghosts of the dead is known by three names: ghost sickness, owl sickness, and darkness sickness. Ordinarily, the Apache will not dare to use the words ghost or owl and will therefore give the last name only. The term ghost sickness is self-explanatory. The disease is also called owl sickness because the ghost is said to come back in the shape of an owl. Owls are the ghost of the departed. The blackest omen of which an Apache can think is the hoot of an owl around camp. The proximity of the bird, especially shortly after the death of the relative, evokes the greatest terror and is often sufficient grounds for the requisite quote-unquote ghost or quote-unquote owl ceremony. I could fill blah blah blah. They explain all the examples. Ghosts are said to trouble people most often at night when it is dark, and most shamans who cure quote-unquote ghost sickness will not conduct their ceremony except at night. For these reasons, they're also, because a person afflicted with the malady is especially nervous and easily frightened at night, the name darkness sickness is an approved euphemism for the disease. It is of special interest to note that the disease always strikes from the head to the heart. All its symptoms are those of fright and include irregular beating of the heart, a choking sensation, a faintness at first seizure. As long as the illness lasts, the patient suffers from excessive timidity, such trembling, weeping, and headache. Although ghosts of non-relatives may and do cause fear and sickness, it is far more common that the disease be the result of an encounter with a ghost or a deceased relative. So if you put these stages of nature between you and the unknown and the different kinds of illness that may affect you, it is very easy to summarize how very specific illnesses might materialize in very specific manner. And having for example, the space of the night, again, a space of darkness, a space of unknown, a space of speculation, there is a larger opportunity for the sickness to manifest itself. By contrast, being close to the owl, again, an animal that you hear a lot more that you can see, also allows you to connect with the unknown in a way that you do not necessarily experience on a day-to-day basis. And these different illnesses all have a different cure, and knowing how those things are connected to your daily life or how you will be able to cure them, perhaps in the long run. And if we can make sense out of this in a structured manner, in a scientific manner, or in some kind of manner that allows us to consider those spirits more specifically, either attached to a place, to a person, to a concept, or whatever, it becomes a matter of our understanding the world in the context of these haunted places that de Certeau pointed out. Derrida, another French philosopher, even proposed that we do a hauntology of the places that we are living in. Now, hauntology as a connection to ontology, the discipline of studying how things are. The hauntology is the discipline of studying how things are haunted. To haunt does not mean to be present, and it is necessary to introduce haunting into the very construction of a concept, of every concept, beginning with the concepts of being and time. That is what we will be calling here a hauntology. So, being present is the study of being, but also studying what is not actually present, what we anticipate, what we think about, what we worry about, what kind of bears on us at all time. These are the ghosts, the spirits that we are living with, and it also need to be taken into account into the daily existence that we live, because we are constantly living with things we do not know, things we cannot control. And living our lives with our spirits also means understanding how those spirits are working out for ourselves and for our lives. Now, there is a material existence to that, but there is also a whole economy to that, of course, because now you have a lot of people whose job it is to make those connections for you, to help you understand your spirits, your ghosts, your demons, to help you get out of those situations, whether or not they understand this, whether or not they make sense out of it, and of course, whether or not we can figure out, for example, technological tools to figure this out, is certainly a matter of economic exploitation to a certain extent. If you are kind of buying or even selling a solution to the understanding of those personal ghosts, you are essentially dealing with a ghost economy, and again, a completely parallel existence in a way that most people, other than you or people like you, would understand. So, if we think of the ghosts as being these mundane, kind of commonplace parts of our lives, it is kind of easy to understand how, by the end of the 19th century, there are, in fact, ghost jokes. For example, in The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde, where the children are faced with a ghost in this new house in which they just moved in, and they just start clowning on the ghost. They think that the ghost is ridiculous, and that, of course, there is no reality to the ghosts. And of course, this is not something that they are scared of. And in fact, the children end up scaring the ghosts. Now there is this connection between an American culture, a British culture, the Victorian culture that is changing itself. It's a pretty layered story, but here in this exchange between the child and the ghost, starve you to death, oh Mr. Ghost. I mean, Mr. Simon, are you hungry? I have a sandwich in my case. Would you like it? No, thank you. I never eat anything now, but it is very kind of you all the same, and you are much nicer than the rest of your horrid, rude, vulgar, dishonest family. The ghost thinks the people are horrible. The most people would tend to think of the ghost as being horrible, but the child, in this kind of weird, privileged place of wonder where everything is already unknown, is not particularly fazed by the ghost appearing there, and treats the ghost like a human, which the ghost finds to be pretty refreshing, of course. Now, if we can think of whatever those ghosts are, however they show up in terms of imaginary friends, or in terms of whatever Totoro is, we can also think of the place that we are playing in our world, and exactly how we are connecting ourselves to the world that we are living in, a world that is constantly changing underneath our feet. Children will tend to take that for granted, and spiritual people will tend to keep that for granted as well, understanding that they have a greater, more mythical understanding, as we'll see in the next couple of weeks. So, connecting these spaces of known and unknown, connecting these spaces of being and non-being, is obviously a pretty important part of our spiritual development, and certainly a big part of what we're going to talk about in the rest of the semester.